All right, Miss Amelia, can you tell me if you believe that women should be real estate investors?
Well, that's an easy one, Teresa. Absolutely. 100%, I think they should be. Partly because I think women think about real estate differently than men. And I want to say we put a little bit more humanity into real estate investing, which I think a lot of real estate investing has lost with it all being focused on numbers and returns and cash on cash returns. Those are all important, but like we're providing housing for families, we're providing spaces for people to raise their children, celebrate Christmas. And I think women are more attuned to that and have I'll say a more humanistic approach to it. So, absolutely. Easy question.
Perfect. I'm glad that was an easy question. Well, everyone, welcome to Bartelle's Money Talk. We're so glad you're here. And ladies, it's for you tonight or today. If you're thinking about investing in real estate, if you have a little bit of fear, I would recommend that you stay for this episode. And also, what I'm going to include as a gift, we're going to talk about why women should protect themselves when you're married. So stay
100%.
tuned. Don't leave because it's going to get good. All right, Miss Amelia, can you introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, Teresa. My name is Amelia Misenheimer. I have been investing in real estate since 2010. I have over a dozen properties myself. We actually now own two internationally. So I've seen it all. I was previously a full-time realtor. I'm still a licensed realtor in the state of New Mexico, but also I owned a property management company where we managed over 450 properties for over 100 different investors, managing about 43 million worth of assets just across our general area. When you talk real estate, I have probably seen it, lived through it, experienced it, have a war story about it, for better or worse, right? There's two sides to that coin. And so I recently, or 2021, married a military man. We ended up moving overseas. We were stationed in England, which is how I started investing over there. And I ended up selling both my real estate brokerage and property management company. And navigating that sell, I had my rentals. I've actually been previously married and divorced, and I had my rental properties. And having those assets have really helped me navigate several massive life changes of, selling my company. The military loves to call you a dependent, which going from like boss woman to dependent was a very tough shift. So having those assets outside of my business really gave me the financial fluidity and flexibility to navigate that transition and those years of living abroad and being able to travel and explore and see everything else, which was fantastic.
I know. And so are you currently a military spouse?
I am. My husband's active duty Air Force. So he's actually working on his PhD right now. So it's a little bit of a different tempo, which I am very, very thankful for.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, we've got a fixed time on this location and moving to the next location in about a year and a half. And I have no idea where we're going or what we're doing. So it's, a lot of uncertainty in my life, which I've learning how to embrace. And that's really why I kind of transitioned into this online consulting, because I needed a way, I wanted to share my wisdom. Learned a lot of hard knocks over a decade of real estate investing. And I feel like I owe it back to like
Mm-hmm.
how could I save you from going through that same headache that I had to learn the hard way? So that's kind of how I shifted into my online consulting and working with people. Both I work with people locally in person, but also, on Zoom, because geographically, I'm not stable. So
Mm-hmm.
I'm always all over the place.
Well, because this is going to be like one of the meats of our topic and our story. And one thing okay, so I'm currently married, but I've seen so many women I don't want to use a bad word, they just get messed over. I'm sorry. By their husbands. They're so in love. Next thing you know, he's coming home. I don't love you no more, or I'm leaving. And she is left with nothing.
Yes.
I can't tell you how many stories I've heard about it. But when you're in love, you don't think, okay, this may not last. Like you don't go in it planning for it not to last, but it's a probability that it won't last. So can you talk to ladies who may be even contemplating getting a divorce, or they may be thinking about getting married? How did having real estate help you during that transition when you got a divorce?
Real estate is a unique asset because obviously it's very stable and it's big, right? Like you don't lose a house. You don't misplace it. It doesn't get commingled accidentally. Those things take action. So especially if you're investing in real estate and have, say, a house from when you were in college and you want to keep it and it's now a great rental, or your first home and you guys are going to get married and move into a home together, all of these conversations, right? You had it before you got married, so making sure it stays that way. But the big thing with real estate, and again, I'm not a lawyer, not, a financial advisor, I'm not an accountant, all of my
Mhm.
disclaimers there.
Mhm.
It's really like commingling of funds. If you get married and all of a sudden your new spouse's funds are going into your rental property, then it does get little messy and they can lay claim to the property. So whenever I had my first marriage, I kept everything separate. Everything was always titled in my name. I never got it untitled. I never put his name on anything. And it was a short term marriage, less than 2 years. So it's obviously different when you've been married 20 years kind of thing. But
Mhm.
having those assets, having that separate, I had a separate rental account, all my money stayed there. It was really easy to prove that he did not have any claim to that, which thankfully didn't come to that. But even though we got divorced, I still had him sign as part of our divorce agreement a quit claim deed, releasing his rights of that property. So 20 years down the road, if I'm trying to sell a property, it can't come up of like, oh, well, your first husband, who was a
Mhm.
blip on the life radar now has claim and you have to get him to sign off on paperwork, or his kids have claim, or anything like that. So really just being intentional. And then as I went into my second marriage, I had a prenup. We went through that. I hired a lawyer, and my husband and I had that conversation, and he came in with some assets as well. And his were more monetary assets like
Mhm.
retirement accounts and savings and investments
Mhm.
and stuff like that, where mine was real estate, but still outlining what's mine and what's his should something come to an end. I think
Mhm.
really just it just puts you on an even playing field,
Mhm.
whether good, bad, and different. It is what it is. So you might as well document it, get it clear, and that way everybody has the same protection in it.
Okay, so ladies, I hope you heard what she said because I don't want you to be a statistic. Yeah, I mean, you have to protect yourself, and I don't know why it works this way, but like when you stay at home with your children and your husband is going out working every day and he decides he doesn't want to stay married anymore, I'm just inviting you to please just make sure you protect yourself.
And one more thing on that, Teresa, like retirement accounts, everybody thinks, but he's contributing to his retirement account. Your retirement accounts are yours individually. I have my retirement accounts. He has his retirement accounts. In divorce, you can claim part of his retirement accounts or different things like that. But like you still need to be contributing to your own retirement account. And it can be an IRA you set up through like an Edward Jones or a Robinhood or,
Yes.
whatever it is. But regardless if you're working or not, you still need to be contributing to your own retirement account that has your name on it, because that is your funds, let alone like not even talking about social security or anything like that, just simply retirement account, because those are individual and those walk with the people. So making sure you have yours and it's being contributed to.
Amelia, you gave me goosebumps because back in the day, my husband and I, we didn't know anything about money, right? And so I had a very good friend, and we both were pregnant at the same time, basically staying at home. I was like 28, 29, but Amelia, I still didn't know anything. But her mom was older, retired military. She told me and her daughter, your husbands need to be contributing to you for an IRA. Because what
Mm-hmm.
are you going to do when they graduate from high school? What are you going to do when they go to high school? And I'm like, what? And that's true. And a lot of women don't know that even though you're staying home, if your husband is out working and making money, I don't care if it's $200 a month. You
Right.
make sure he puts some money for you away in an RA that he can not touch if he decides to go
Exactly.
bye bye. And I hate to say it, but women, we got to start protecting ourselves.
You do. And even if you stay married forever, like it's extra money. It's not like it's gonna go to waste. Heck, if you guys are, 50 years of marriage later, use it to take an extra cruise, or you can leave it
Yes,
to your children. It's not like it's ever a waste of money,
it's not.
whether you stay together or not. Like you can use it together later, but if something
Right.
were to happen or he passes away, or there's so many different
Hmm.
scenarios that you have to protect yourself throughout this process.
Yes, Amelia, thank you so much for sharing that
You're
with me.
welcome.
Like, I didn't even tell you that's what I wanted to do, but you jumped right in, and I'm sure that there's a lady out here that needs to hear this. I'm like, I don't care if it's only one life that we can save. I'm so glad if this information is helping you. I'm so glad that it is. If you're watching it on YouTube, leave a comment. Maybe you can be a blessing to another lady. So now, Amelia, because you have so much experience with real estate investing. Can you tell us how to get started in that? Because it seems like it would take a lot of.
It doesn't, depending on how you want to do it. And I think that's, first of all, when we talk real estate investing, that's a huge variety, that's a huge window anymore.
Mhm.
And thankfully, there's different types of different ways to invest. There's so many different things. Traditionally speaking, when you hear real estate investing, you think about like buying the house down the street, in your local community, fixing it up, getting a renter, being called in the middle of the night because of a
Mhm.
clogged toilet. Like that's kind of that traditional sense of real estate investing. First of all, you can start real estate investing with basically zero money down. There's a lot of different ways to do it. They call it creative financing. You can do real estate contracts where the seller acts like the bank. And that's always fun because the seller then gets like, so you're paying the seller interest. So instead of you paying Wells Fargo interest and they don't need any more of your interest money, but the seller gets the interest money. And
Mhm.
also when the seller sells, it reduces their tax exposure as well because they don't have to pay capital gains tax on that property whenever they sell it. I mean, I can totally nerd out on that, but just as an overview, that's a creative way to buy that takes no money down. 100 different ways to, negotiate that. There's obviously small local banks are always so much easier to work with whenever you want to buy real estate than the big banks. So if you have a good relationship with like your local bank, use them first. You might have slightly higher interest rates, but your closing fees are going to be less and your lifetime pain will be less. Working with somebody that's local is more of a handshake situation than your Wells Fargo, who you're just a name on the spreadsheet. You get no
Mhm.
help with them. But then if we take it like a step out, there's ways to invest in real estate via a REIT, and it's REIT. It's a stock. You can buy it on the stock market like you do anything else, and those that company only invests in real estate. So you don't get any like tax benefit or depreciation or anything like that when you invest in REIT, but you're owning some real estate. So it operates differently than, say, your traditional stocks. Then there's like the next level out, which we call syndications. And that's where you're investing some of your money in somebody else's deal. So, for example, I'm actually in the process of starting, it's called a Reg CF. We're going to be building a fourplex in my hometown and we're looking for investors. So, we're not, ready to market it or anything right now. But the goal is that with $5,000, you can invest with me, use my experience, use my knowledge, use my resources, and you get an actual ownership stake in the deal. So you get a Schedule K1, you get a portion of the income, you get a portion of the depreciation, you get a portion of all the expenses to write off your taxes.
Mhm.
So technology and all of these different kind of, and Reg D is another popular one. Like the Grant Cardone is like the big name who's been doing this. You can invest with other people and then you get a fraction of the deal using them to manage and do everything. But obviously, you're betting on that operator. So whoever you invest with, you need to make sure they know what they're doing because they're controlling your money. And so, that's another way to invest in real estate where you're not getting the calls at midnight. You're not worried about a vacancy or turnover, but yet you get a lot of the financial benefits of it. So investing in real estate in this day and age has really completely shifted in so many different ways. And so when people say I want to invest in real estate, like it begs that further question, like what does that look like to you?
Mhm.
Because back kind of like on the intro when we started, like what are your values? Like do you want to improve your community? Like there's a crappy house down the street, you're sick and tired of it being vacant, you want to buy it, fix it up and get a good family in there. Like that's a different value system, priorities than saying I've got $100,000 laying around and I'm going to go invest it with one of these big guys, in a 400 unit apartment complex in Miami, right?
Mhm.
Like there's different priorities there. And I think when we talk investing, and this goes for any type of investing,
Mhm.
being conscientious of your risk tolerances, your values, your priorities is going to make your investing so much more enjoyable because there's nothing worse than like, I really don't want to buy this house. And I've done this, like, I don't, but it was a really good deal. So I bought it. And every time that phone rang, I dreaded it. Like, I didn't want to answer. I didn't like the tenant. I didn't like the area. I didn't like the property. I hated it. So finally I sold it because I'm like, I don't need this in my life.
Mhm.
And, and sometimes we get into that, oh, it's a really good deal. Is it worth your sanity? Like what level of values, risks, tolerances do you have? And just being really honest with yourself in that process.
Well, I didn't ask you this at the beginning, but I bet someone wants to know. What made you decide to go into real estate investing?
I was born into it, honestly. So my parents actually started their own business. They sold mobile homes, manufactured homes. We don't like the T word. I don't like to say trailers, but that's what they used to be called. But we don't use the T word. And so that's what they started selling. And so they kind of got in the business. And then my aunt and uncle actually started buying rentals. And my mom was like, oh, that looks like a good idea. So then my parents started investing. So as a kid, I remember going around collecting rent with my parents. And I saw, like, I remember we went, this is like one of these stories that sticks with me. We went to go collect rent. It was a little bit before Christmas. And we pull up in this house and they've got like a go kart in the driveway and they got toys everywhere. I didn't have a go kart. I didn't have all these toys. And so my mom goes up and she's like, "Where's rent? You know, it's due. You're behind." And the lady was like, "I don't have it." And mom was like, "You clearly have been spending your money." And she's like, "Well, you're going to be evicted before Christmas." And the woman was arguing and was upset, and the kid came out and was like, "You can have my go-kart." So my mom, God bless my mother, loaded up that kid's go-kart in lieu of rent, because that kid had more sense of like, I want to stay in my home for Christmas, than the mom who's like, "You can't take my kid's toys." And the kid was like, "Take it, I want my home." And when you see that as a kid to another kid, you don't have those filters, you don't have that less than filter, or anything like that. I was just saw this kid, I was like, "Oh my gosh." So that's how I got my first go-kart, was my parents basically repoed it from a renter in lieu of rent for that month. So seeing that kind of growing up and being raised with that conversation, because my parents were always very open with money. We discussed business at the dinner table. I remember discussing CD interest rates when I was like 10. They were 18%, and that was a big deal. I had my first bank account at 6. So I was just kind of, brought up in this realm. So it's just one of those things that kind of fell naturally for me, as in it's the next thing I do. And my brother actually bought his first house in college, and he rented it out to two buddies, and he basically lived for free. And my mom said she'd help me get my own house for college. I was like, "Oh," I was like, "I'm not staying here. I don't want a house." And I was so mad, loosely said, when my brother called me, 10 years later, was like, "Amelia, I just paid off my house, my first house in college." And I was so mad because I was like, I had that same opportunity, but I got in my head too of like, I don't want that responsibility. I don't want to stay around here, versus seeing that longer term goal. So even though I was raised in it, I've still made those mistakes, but it was really fun for him to have that house paid off in 10 years, which was amazing. So nobody's perfect. We all live and learn through this process. We all make mistakes. We all make some costly mistakes,
Yes.
but it's really seeing that long-term value, because even like working with these investors as a property manager, I had clients, they sold their business. They sold their
Mhm.
business, for millions of dollars. And that's great, but that's not what really funds their retirement. It's these investments that they've made year over year. It's their real estate, it's their stocks, it's, their personal wealth is really funding their retirement. It's not their business. And I think
Wow.
that also is a message that get lost with a lot of entrepreneurs. They think their business is going to be, the catch all, provide for everything. And even my parents gave us a really great life, but now that they sold their business, their rentals and their real estate is what's really funding their retirement.
Wow. You need to write a book. That story too, that was a good story. Like the child had more sense than the mom,
Yeah.
and she spent her rent on toys. And your
Hmm.
mom was like, "Okay, I'm taking it." Hopefully,
Yeah.
she paid her rent on time after that.
Yeah. Yeah. And that was, and it was just, I mean, obviously it still gives me the chills today, but to like be in there and see that and live through that. And then, also like, that's how I got my first go-kart, which is, kind of weird for me too. Like it was kind of a
Mhm.
weird, schadenfreude kind of thing of, am I happy about this go-kart? Do I feel bad about this go-kart? Even as a kid, I was like, I don't really know how I feel about this go-kart.
But you had fun on it, I bet.
Well, I did. I did. My brother
I
and I
bet
had a
you did.
blast. Yes, we did.
Earlier, you mentioned a property management company.
Hmm.
So if we have some ladies listening, maybe two of them want to go in a deal together, do you recommend that female investors have a property management company? Like, how would you manage that part?
I recommend you be real honest with yourself about how, I'll use the word tough. That's not, maybe not the best word, but I'll use the word tough you want to be. And I think, when you're dealing with property management, you are dealing with somebody's money and you're dealing with their shelter, which are two of like the most emotionally charged things out there, if you will. Somebody coming to you with their sob stories. They can't pay their rent, and we're all human, right? We should have the ability to give some grace. Like, don't get me
Mhm.
wrong. But when your grandma dies for the third time, you're like, at some point you got to come up with that rent.
Huh.
And the same with, oh my, and it's always tenants call with that terror, like, "Oh my God, my house is flooded," or, and when you're a property manager and you deal with this all the time, you're like, okay, where's the water? What's coming on? Go do, your shut off is in the alley. Go find this. This is how you work through that. And you learn that. I wasn't born with that. I had to
Mhm.
learn those things.
Mhm.
But that's probably the biggest thing about, owning a property or managing a property yourself. Yes, you can save that 10% management fee, roughly speaking, higher or lower, different areas, but you can save that management fee doing it yourself. But are you prepared and willing to deal with those phone calls? Because that's what comes with it. And 9 months out of the 12 will be great. And you're going to have like a few months where something comes up, and it's going to be like, everybody's showing up at the tenant's house for Thanksgiving tomorrow, and you're going to need to get a new stove, or, things like that.
Mhm.
So just being aware, do you want that or not? And if you don't, then find a property manager. And no property manager is perfect. I would recommend interviewing several of them and making sure that you agree with their systems and their communication, because that's really the number one thing that goes astray when you're working with a property manager is like, you don't know how to log onto their portal. You don't like their reports. They don't ever call you, or it's that communication and the kind of that daily operation. So whenever you're talking to those property managers, making sure you understand, like, how are you going to be communicating with me? Like, how do you notify me if a tenant has an issue? Is it you just send me an email and I'm expected to see it? Do you take care of it? What's the cost limit of anything under $200 you automatically take care of? Whatever the case is, like, just understanding what those expectations are on both
Mhm.
sides.
Mhm. Okay, so going off of what you just said, it sparked another question, and I'm gonna have to let you go so I can get you again. So, like, if we have someone that's contemplating it because what you're saying is so good, if they have a mortgage, right, on that, just say they bought two properties and they have a mortgage. Like, how would they be able to like make money off of it? Because, like, if they charge rent, would the rent need to include everything that comes with the house, like the HOA and maintenance? How do
I
you make
Ideally,
money?
yes. Yes. Ideally, that, like, your rent covers the HOA, it covers your insurance, it covers your property taxes, it covers your mortgage, it covers all of the pieces. So, and that difference that you have between rent income minus your expenses, that's cash flow. So when you hear people talk about your cash flow, I cash flow $500 a month. Well, that means you cover all of those kind of fixed expenses, right? The expenses that are there every month. Rent, it's that difference between rent and your fixed expenses. And so expenses come up, like if it's vacant, you're going to be paying the utilities, or, something breaks, you got to put in a new hot water heater, like all of those.
Mhm.
That's where that cash flow every month should go into your rental account. And I always encourage everybody have a separate rental account where rent money goes in, expenses come out. It makes accounting so much easier. It makes taxes so much easier, but it gives you that kind of like safe boundary zone that this money isn't part of your, monthly shopping spree money, that like it's there for when that water heater goes out, because that water heater will go out. You will have a bad tenant that trashes everything. Like, it will happen. And I tell people 1 out of 10 tenants are terrible. And it just, is it your first tenant that's terrible, or is it your 10th tenant that's terrible? But generally speaking, 1 out of 10 of your tenants are going to be terrible. So just know it. It's coming. Be prepared.
And be ready for it. So, going off of that, since you've been doing it for so long, if someone is getting ready to start, what would you tell them to be careful of? Like, can you share one of the major mistakes that you've made that you will never forget?
Yes, I thought the floor was soft. I looked at this house and I thought the floor was soft. And I was like, "Oh, no big deal. I'll replace the subfloor. Like, that's fine." Oh, no, the whole entire foundation was rotted out. It was wood on dirt. So we pulled up the floor, the subfloor, and like the floor joists were like just suspending above the foundation. And I was like, "Are you serious?" So then we had to build a false wall to hold up the roof, where we ripped out the entire exterior wall and foundation, built a whole new foundation, pulled up the subfloor in the other half of the house, put in concrete pillars to stabilize it, rebuilt the exterior wall, re-supported the roof, took out it was a very, very costly learning lesson. So making sure you do your inspections, and you're never going to catch everything. I will say that, like, you'll never catch everything. So there's always, just be prepared for the unexpected, because the unexpected will happen. And when I tell people who are like starting out investing in real estate, I always say your first 5 rental properties are the hardest, because if you have one property and one vacancy and one mortgage, that means that mortgage is coming out of your pocket to cover while that house is vacant, right? Like, there's
Mhm.
very little cushion. But if you have 5 properties in one vacancy, then you've got 4 properties putting in some cash flow. You've got a little cushion coming in there, and they can help float that fifth one that's having, its
Mhm.
own personal crisis, whether it was a bad tenant or just a vacancy or whatever it is. So that's the thing with real estate. It is a bit of a numbers game. Like your hardest real estate ownership is like one or two properties, because you have all of the responsibility, all of the liability, you've got the mortgages, you've got the expenses, but you don't have a lot of extra cushion built
Mhm.
up. So, and maybe if you like inherit a property and you don't have a mortgage or something like that,
Mhm.
obviously it makes it a lot easier.
Mhm.
But that 1 to 2 rentals is really the hardest place to be with investment properties.
Okay. And so do you recommend an LL?
Actually, I don't. Um,
I didn't expect
no,
that answer.
I
Okay.
know.
Well, you got to give me just a little bit on that.
I know.
Okay.
So, first of all, single member LLCs are passed through into your own personal income anyways.
Mhm.
Again, I'm not an accountant, but this is how I operate my business. Most LLCs, most people do not have the actual management of the LLC clean enough to not pierce the corporate veil, if you will, as far as, because LLC, you're going to need a separate bank account, you need a separate tax return. Like for me personally, the accounting level requirements that go on top of everything is not worth it to me for my rentals. I've got over a dozen properties. None of them are in LLC. They are all in my name. And I have owners who have 70 rentals and they're all in the owner's personal name. I have owners and they have, every LLC is like every property is in a different LLC. But like literally, you have to have a separate checkbook for every LLC. You have to have a separate bank account for every LLC. So the level of accounting requirements required to make that truly work and to truly give you the protection that everybody talks about, like take some serious operational organization. And it wasn't worth the headache to me. And let's be real, if somebody wants to sue you in this day and age, they're going to sue you. It does not matter what LLC, it does not matter if you looked at them wrong. Like if they really want to sue you, they will sue you. And your anonymous LLC, if they have a good enough attorney, they will figure you out. Like it's nothing is protection. So I recommend having good insurance, making sure you know what your coverage is and being realistic about that. And let's be real. Most people never get sued. Most people don't have crisis. Most people don't have these big issues. But when they do come, you want to be prepared. But I think a lot of times we live in that state of horror and terror and what if, and
Yes.
odds are it's never going to happen to you. So
Right.
don't stress about it every day for the rest of your life.
And I completely agree with you. Thank you. I'm so glad that I asked you that question because if somebody's thinking about it, I don't want them to just go off and get a LLC. But see, you've given them another way to look at it. So
Yeah,
thank
it's
you
not.
for doing that.
And I'll say if you want to do an LLC later, you can. Like this,
Mhm.
and that's the thing too. Like all of this stuff, it's not you make this decision once and you can never change your mind. Like if
Right.
it gets to that point, you want to change your mind, change your mind. Put them into LLCs, deed them over. Like there's ways to do it. It's not the end of the world.
Okay. So now you said that you are doing some consulting. Tell the
Yes.
listeners what you are doing.
So I am a wealth building strategist is kind of how I've positioned myself. I love real estate. I think real estate is the biggest piece of actual wealth building, but there's a lot of pieces to wealth building. There's stocks, there's investments, there's cryptocurrencies, heck, there's art and cars and NFTs, right? Like there's all sorts of things. So it's really about creating a strategy that aligns with your personal values, expectations, goals, and they can be whatever you want them to be. And there's no right or wrong way to do this. And we don't need old white men telling us how to do this. That's my biggest complaint. So sick of old white men telling me how to do things. So I really work with people to create a strategy and empower them that if you want to hire a financial advisor, let's go find the right financial advisor to help you manage your retirement accounts. I have one that manages my retirement accounts. Like, don't get me wrong. Like, we need a team. So I'm really helping people to build that team, look at things a little bit differently, and wrap their head around what they want to do, what they don't want to do, what tolerances they have to really create kind of that comprehensive picture, because you can do it yourself. You can hire people to help you, but it needs to get done because sitting around thinking about it is, not the right thing to do. So I work with people individually, one on one. I do, we can do short term commitments, we can do long term commitments, really just trying to empower people, especially women, but anybody, to really grow their personal wealth because
Mhm.
especially when women have more wealth, we spend it better. We contribute more money back into our communities. We're the ones sponsoring little league teams. We're the ones buy and bake, sell cookies. Our funds are really the ones that are recirculating. We're grocery shopping. We're the ones going down talking to the insurance agents locally. Like women are really the ones that funnel that money, especially in your local communities. So the more money women have, the better all of our communities are going to be as well.
And I agree. That was so
Good.
good and so true. We rule the world,
We
man.
do.
We
We
do. So
do.
now, if a listener has just been intrigued by you and your information, how can she find you?
I am on all the social medias. It's Amelia on Instagram. It's like Amelia G. Misenheimer. On LinkedIn, it's Amelia Misenheimer. My website's Amelia Misenheimer. I think there's one other Amelia Misenheimer out there, and she's a kid. So that's not me. But it's just Amelia Misenheimer. You'll find me on one of the socials or my website. I'm the only one out there.
Okay. Well, Amelia, I want to tell you thank you so much for joining me. This has been eye-opening. Listeners, if you are on YouTube or on the podcast, all of Amelia's contact information will be in our show notes or the description. If you have questions or if you need help managing your wealth, please reach out to Amelia. And Amelia, thanks again so much for joining me. It was so nice to have you.
Thank you, Teresa. This has been a fabulous conversation.
You're welcome.